What happens when you're no longer useful to people? When I hear discussions about Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka or Stepford Wives by Ira Levin, much of the emphasis is put on the scary callousness that comes from the protagonist's loved ones, their parents, their spouses, their siblings. But to me, all of these people are just representations of society at large, and the most interesting points of this story are how they differ based on the protagonist's gender. Well, that's what I plan to break down for you guys today. If you haven't seen or read either, they're actually available for free online, so I recommend you go check them out. If you have, you can check out my description for timestamps, skip through the summaries of one or both of them. Beginning with Metamorphosis, for those of you who haven't read it, the story is basically that Would You Love Me If I Was a Worm TikTok trend from a while ago, but instead it's written by a mentally ill German man in the 1900s. Franz Kafka uses it to describe the life of a man named Gregor Samsa who wakes up one day to find himself transformed into a human-sized beetle. Of course, it's usually seen as a more disgusting type of bug, especially when you find one even bigger than yourself, so it's not long before his life falls apart because of this fateful random transformation. He loses his job of being a traveling salesman. His mother can't even stand the sight of him anymore, or she faints. Now he's pretty much trapped in his bedroom for much of his daily life because his appearance is so off-putting it robs him of his freedoms. However, luckily, Gregor comes to adjust all right to this change, as good as someone could adjust, I suppose. His sister brings him the rotten food scraps he seems to prefer as a beetle, and he finds himself enjoying climbing around on the walls and the ceiling of his bedroom. It's not the being a giant beetle that ruins his life completely, but the losing his job that does, and the repercussions of that. Gregor's family leaves his bedroom door open for a few hours each day so he can watch them from the room. During this time, he takes in the financial struggles the lack of his paycheck is bringing them. It seems they were relying on him as some sort of breadwinner to provide for the rest of them, despite living with his parents and his sister. Through both communications between him and his family, and then later an implied resentment between them, Gregor is stripped of more and more of his humanity as time goes on. All of his furniture is taken out of his room, even the decorations, and he ends up injured after a misunderstanding with his father. They end up taking less and less care of him throughout the story. Because of money troubles, his father gets a job, and later the family rent out rooms in the house to pay bills. Everything hits a new low when these boarders come. His room ends up cramped with spared furniture and junk, and then the boarders even threaten to move out later when they catch a glimpse of Gregor. He hurries off to hide, but overhears his family wishing that Gregor would just leave them, that their lives would be so much easier without him. The guilt, along with starvation, drives him to death to stop the struggles that he's burdening them with. As soon as he dies, just to rub salt in the wound, the Samsa family's lives improve drastically. They take a trip to the countryside, they kick out the boarders, they even move to a nicer apartment, and Gregor's sister has sort of like a glow up, to the point where her parents are considering finding her a husband. So this is very clearly a horror/tragedy. In my English classes, when me and my classmates had to analyze it, many of us focused on the horror lying in the callousness of his family. Then I watched Stepford Wives, the 1975 version, and my perspective shifted. Stepford Wives should be considered a classic with how many stories it's gone on to inspire, but the original was a book written in 1974 by Ira Levin, the author of Rosemary's Baby. Today, though, we're talking about the first movie adaptation made a year after the book's publication. The story across the two are more or less the same, and I'll break it down pretty quickly here. You watch from a woman named Joanna's perspective, a mother and aspiring photographer who's moving with her family from New York to Stepford Village in Connecticut. The place is too dull for her tastes, but she makes the most of it and makes friends with another new resident named Bobby. Both women are very spirited and get along really well as they learn more about Stepford. Meanwhile, Joanna's husband joins the town's men's association where they hang out and they smoke cigars and they act vaguely misogynistically because men needed a club to do that in small town Connecticut in 1975. But whatever. Joanna and her friend Bobby find out that there also used to be a women's club in Stepford and they go about starting a new one. However, it seems that most of the women in the town are incredibly dull. They literally only talk about homemaking, cleaning, cooking, their kids, and their husbands. No hobbies, no interests, no nothing. Joanna and Bobby meet another woman that they connect with, but not for long since she comes back from this couple's trip with her husband to end up acting like all of the other wives in Stepford. It freaks the two women out, but before long, the same thing happens to Bobby. By now, Joanna is deeply disturbed, but the entire time, her husband just continues to gaslight her and act as if nothing's wrong at all. He talks her into making an appointment with the therapist, but the therapist encourages Joanna to leave town with her children until it feels safe for her to return, if it ever does. When she comes back to escape, though, things are even worse. Her children are missing, and after arguing with the weird Stepforded Bobby again, Joanna finds out that she's a robot. The kids, however, are at the men's association. She goes to find them and ends up being killed by her own robot doppelganger. The men's association have been secretly recording information about her this whole time to make a robot version of herself that's the perfect housewife for her. But the horror of the movie still stands. And surprisingly, it's both really similar and intriguingly different to Kafka's Metamorphosis, especially on the basis of gender. The two stories share really similar plot structures and themes, but the differences between them are even more fascinating than their similarities. To start with, both Metamorphosis and Stepford Wives have a horrific transformation in their stories, but with polar opposite timing. Stepford's transformation is the tragic ending of the story, as well as the symbol of Joanna's final loss of humanity and agency. In Metamorphosis, the tragic ending is a domino effect of the transformation, which happens right at the start of the short story. The loss of Gregor's humanity is a result of the transformation, but also from his family's reactions to it. They both serve as allegories for two different topics as well. Stepford Wives is obviously, and clearly stated by the author Ira Levin, meant to be a satirical representation of how men reacted to feminism and women joining the workplace. Oh, if only she knew how relevant it would be even now. On the other hand, as I've been outlining and writing the script for this video, Metamorphosis has more and more clearly looked to me as an allegory for becoming disabled as a man, and the emasculation and guilt that comes from no longer being the breadwinner of the family. Gregor dies from that guilt, feeling at fault for his family resenting him, and Joanna dies from her resentment too. But the most tragic part of Stepford Wives isn't that her husband and the men's association took her life from her, but they took her agency and her dreams too. At some point in the movie, I don't exactly remember when, Joanna remarks to someone that all she wants more than anything is to be remembered. That's why she's a photographer. She finally gets a chance to work towards that goal, even all the way from Stepford, when her photos were to be shown in a gallery exposition. And then she goes home and finds Bobby replaced. During the entire story, everyone around Joanna was stolen from her. A new friend, her best friend, her husband, her kids, even herself. Meanwhile, in Metamorphosis, everyone might remain the same, at least physically, but they hate Gregor for being the one to change. That hatred makes them change too. With all these differences, some of the most important parts of each story are quite similar to each other. In each, the loved ones are the one to strip the protagonist of their humanity in one way or another. And both have very similar messages, too. Being non-conforming isn't what's horrific in these stories, but what's horrific is what the world does to you when you don't fit in. If I were just a pretentious creative writing major, I'd end the video here, but I'm actually a pretentious creative writing major who took sociology classes, so there's even more to talk about with these two. Each of the stories are actually very clever critiques on society, and when you plant one right next to the other, the gender dynamics are even more relevant than on their own. But to understand all of that, I first need to break down two pretty basic sociology concepts to you: symbolic interactionism and the doing gender theory. First, symbolic interactionism is a theory with three main ideas. 1. Humans act towards people or things based on their assigned meaning. 2. These meanings come from interactions with others, especially when the brain is first developing when we're young. And 3. Humans adjust these meanings as time goes on, and they internally interpret more of the world. For example, emojis. When you first start using social media and talking to others, you'd probably think that the best way to convey laughter would be the laughing crying emoji. When you see more people your age using emojis, you'd probably learn that the sobbing emoji or the skull emoji are what convey laughter for Gen Z instead. Different actions have different symbolic meanings to different audiences. In Stepford, the symbolic meaning of a wife is to be obedient, domestic, and to take care of the house and children while your husband works. In Metamorphosis, the meaning of a breadwinner is to be able-bodied, attractive, and to bring in an income for your family. We learn about the depths of these meanings throughout each story, as the characters are corrected and observed by others based on their performance in each role. As soon as Gregor stops being able-bodied and attractive, at least not horrifically ugly, he loses his job and therefore his breadwinner status. The rest of the wives and their husbands ridicule Joanna and Bobby for not being proper housewives like they are. The second concept I need to explain is the theory of doing gender. Basically, it takes symbolic interactionism and applies it to how gender works in society. Within society, gender is performed through interactions based off of what's socially accepted for men and women. Pink is for girls, blue is for boys, that type of stuff. These performances are learned at a very young age, or even before you're born, from gender reveals to sit like a lady, to the clothes your parents pick out for you in grade school, to being teased for having a crush on a kid with the opposite sex, etc., etc. It's all a performance, and by the time you reach adulthood, you don't even have to think about your part in it. In Stepford Wives, Joanna is not acting in accordance with Stepford's image of a woman. Stepford is a stand-in for society at large. When she's turned into a robot at the end, this is the very horrific metaphor for how society will try to, quote-unquote, correct this behavior. By doing this, it not only takes away her agency, but her life and humanity in itself, as some sort of punishment for being your own person. Because you literally cannot be a perfect wife and a perfect woman as long as you're human, no matter how hard you try at it. Metamorphosis, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated with this argument. At the time it was written in 1915, Gregor begins as the prime example of what man is supposed to be in society. He has a pretty steady career as a traveling salesman, he's able-bodied, he's paying the bills for his entire family. In other words, he's productive. When he gets turned into a beetle, he can no longer be productive at all, especially since he's so grotesque that he cannot even leave his bedroom. This transforms him into the complete opposite of what men are supposed to be. His family's growing resentment and later refusal care for him is a reflection of how society will turn its back on men as soon as they stop being productive in this sense. Even though both Metamorphosis and Stepford Wives aren't recent by any means, the writing in them still stands, as do all of the meanings that you can glean from it. That could be why both are still culturally relevant now. Metamorphosis is considered a literary classic, and Stepford Wives has gone on to inspire many other movies and stories in general as time goes on, like the 2004 adaptation with the same name, Don't Worry Darling, or even Companion that came out this year. Maybe in another video I can break down some of those movies, but that's all I have for now. Thanks so much for watching through this entire video. If you thought this video was interesting and you'd like me to do more of this, and you'd like me to do more like this, leave a like and comment to let me know. I really love reading through every single comment you guys leave. Thanks for watching!